brutal reality of medieval plagues. Tonight, we begin with something truly horrifying, a journey through mankind's most merciless killers. We're diving deep into the savage reality of medieval plagues, but not the sanitized history book version with simple statistics and clinical descriptions. No, we're exploring the raw, putrid reality of diseases so terrifying that merely hearing their names made our ancestors tremble with fear. Before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these unfiltered glimpses into history's most brutal chapters. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always fascinated to see which corners of our comfortable modern world are about to glimpse the horrors our ancestors endured. Tonight, I'll take you through humanity's most devastating biological predators, from the apocalyptic Black Death that wiped out half of Europe in just 4 years, through the lice-borne typhus that turned filthy medieval existence into a death sentence, the horrific smallpox that permanently disfigured those lucky enough to survive, the bloody flux of dysentery that literally dissolved victims from within, and finally, the patient killer tuberculosis that consumed entire families, generation after generation. You'll discover what it actually felt like to have your body betray you in the most grotesque ways imaginable. The buboes erupting in your groin and armpits, swelling to the size of apples, before bursting with foul-smelling pus. The relentless bloody diarrhea of dysentery that left you lying in your own waste as you slowly dehydrated. The literal liquefaction of your lungs as tuberculosis consumed you from within. This wasn't just uncomfortable, this was hell on earth, experienced by millions of our ancestors in their final days. We'll explore not just the physical torment, but the psychological horror of watching your loved ones transform into unrecognizable, suffering creatures before your eyes, knowing you were likely next. You'll understand why medieval people viewed these diseases not as medical conditions, but as divine punishment or demonic possession. What else could explain such comprehensive destruction of human bodies? So dim the lights and prepare yourself. The medieval plague world you're about to experience isn't just uncomfortable, it's a relentless assault on every sense that will make you profoundly grateful to be living now, with our antibiotics, vaccines, and indoor plumbing. The stench alone would make you vomit within minutes, but that's merely the beginning of your problems. Congratulations, you've just woken up in medieval Europe. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Death surrounds you in forms more creative and horrifying than your worst nightmares could conjure. Welcome to the Age of Plagues, where your body isn't your own, but rather a battleground for pathogens that have perfected the art of human suffering. Let us begin with the most infamous killer of all, the Black Death, a plague so devastating it remains the benchmark against which all other catastrophes are measured. A biological holocaust that didn't just kill individuals but destroyed entire societies in the blink of a historical eye. You wake to the sound of the death cart rumbling past your window. Again. The third time tonight, the scrape of wooden wheels on cobblestones has become as familiar as your own heartbeat, though infinitely more terrifying. Bring out your dead. The hollow-eyed collector's voice doesn't even sound human anymore. How could it, after weeks of gathering corpses? The stench hits you even through the rags you've stuffed into the cracks around your door. That distinctive smell, not just death, but this death, sweet, putrid, cloying, a miasma so thick you can taste it at the back of your throat. You've learned to recognize it instantly, separate from the ordinary filth of your medieval existence. This is the smell of the Black Death. The plague came without warning. One day, life continued in its brutal but familiar rhythm. The backbreaking work, the constant hunger, the everyday violence. The next, whispers spread through the market of strange deaths in the harbor town. Sailors found dead aboard their ships, their bodies covered in mysterious swellings, black as midnight. You laughed it off. Death is your constant companion in this world. What's one more way to die? You aren't laughing now. The first victim in your street was the baker's wife. You saw her at the well in the morning, complaining of a headache, unusual fatigue. By evening, she was delirious with fever, screaming about the pain in her armpit, where a swelling the size of a hen's egg had appeared. Angry red, then purplish black. By dawn, she was dead. 2 days later, the baker followed, along with their 3 children and the apprentice. An entire household, gone. Not over months or years, but days. You cross yourself as the cart passes. 5 more bodies today from your street alone. Yesterday it was 7. The collectors don't bother counting anymore. They simply pile the corpses like cordwood, occasionally tossing handfuls of lime over particularly putrid ones. The mass grave outside town grows daily, a gaping mouth that will never be satisfied. You haven't left your home in 6 days. Your meager food stores dwindle. Eventually, you'll have to venture out or starve, but each hour safely inside feels like cheating death. You know exactly what awaits if the pestilence finds you. You've watched enough neighbors succumb to recognize the progression. The thought makes your skin crawl, as though the disease were already beneath it, waiting. It begins with exhaustion so profound, it feels like your bones are dissolving from within. A headache builds behind your eyes, until even the dim light of a candle becomes torture. Then comes the fever. Not the gentle warming of a winter illness, but a consuming inferno that makes you tear at your clothes, then beg for blankets, as uncontrollable shivering racks your body. But these are merely the harbingers of true horror. The buboes come next. Swellings that begin in the lymph nodes nearest to where the rat flea delivered its fatal bite. Most commonly in the groin, armpit, or neck, these swellings begin as painful lumps that grow with terrifying speed. Within hours, they swell from pea-sized to egg-sized, then larger still. The skin stretches tight over these buboes, shiny and discolored, first angry red, then darkening to purple and black as they fill with infected blood and pus. The pain from these swellings defies description. You've watched strong men who've worked fields from dawn till dusk without complaint, men who've broken bones and kept working, reduced to sobbing, writhing agony by a single touch to their buboes. Some victims claw at their own flesh in desperation, as though they could dig out the source of such torment. If the disease progresses to your lungs, God help you, you begin coughing blood, drowning from within as your lungs fill with fluid. Those with this pneumonic form rarely last more than a day, their bodies racked with coughing so violent it tears muscle from bone. But the most horrifying transformation comes as death approaches. The hemorrhaging begins beneath your skin, not subtle bruising, but dramatic, spreading patches of blackness. Your extremities darken with gangrene as blood vessels become blocked. Fingers, toes, lips, and nose turn the color of a days-old corpse while you still draw breath. Your living body begins to rot before your eyes. They call it the Black Death for good reason. The priest, if you can find one still living and willing to approach, will offer last rites. But his prayers seem hollow now, his promises of heaven empty when confronted with such earthly hell. The true horror of the plague isn't just what it does to bodies, but what it does to the world. Everything you understood about how life works has been unmade. Your neighbor's entire family vanished in a week. Mother, father, 5 children, from the oldest son of 16 summers to the babe still at breast. The house stands empty now, door ajar, possessions untouched because no one dares enter. Sometimes at night, you think you hear crying from within, though whether ghost or rat or simply the wind, you dare not investigate. The church, once the center of community life, has become either deserted or a scene of feverish, desperate piety. Half the priests have died, and many survivors have fled, unable to face the constant stream of last rites and burials. Those who remain perform mass burials with cursory blessings. Some villages have run out of consecrated ground entirely and simply dump bodies in hastily dug pits. The promise that your mortal remains would rest in hallowed earth, a promise central to your faith, has become another casualty of the pestilence. Markets stand empty, fields go unharvested, livestock wander ownerless, adding their panicked cries to the sounds of human suffering. In some villages, survivors simply leave, abandoning generations of history to seek safety elsewhere, though nowhere seems safe. The roads have become arteries of death, carrying the plague from settlement to settlement like poison through a body. Perhaps most terrifying is how the plague strips away every pretense of civilization, revealing the animal fear beneath human society. You've watched families abandon their own, mothers leaving children, husbands leaving wives, the healthy fleeing from the sick despite lifetimes of love and bonds of blood. The dying are left alone, not just in body, but in spirit, facing their final hours in isolated agony. Markets stand empty. Fields go unharvested. Livestock wander ownerless, adding their panicked cries to the sounds of human suffering. In some villages, survivors simply leave, abandoning generations of history to seek safety elsewhere, though nowhere seems safe. The roads have become arteries of death, carrying the plague from settlement to settlement like poison through a body. Perhaps most terrifying is how the plague strips away every pretense of civilization, revealing the animal fear beneath human society. You've watched families abandon their own, mothers leaving children, husbands leaving wives, the healthy fleeing from the sick despite lifetimes of love and bonds of blood. The dying are left alone, not just in body, but in spirit, facing their final hours in isolated agony. Those who should offer comfort have become threats. The approach of a loved one is now cause for terror rather than joy. Are they bringing death with them? Touch, once a source of connection and solace, has become suspect. You flinch when someone reaches toward you, even in kindness. The fundamental human need for contact withers, replaced by fear. And beneath it all runs a current of helpless rage, seeking targets. In some places, Jews have been blamed, accused of poisoning wells. Foreigners, lepers, beggars, anyone different becomes suspect. You've heard of entire communities massacred not by disease but by their neighbors. Fear overwhelming reason. Even cats, which might have helped by killing disease-carrying rats, have been slaughtered as suspected agents of Satan, inadvertently allowing rodent populations to explode and spread more disease. The sun still rises each morning over a transformed world, 2 months into the pestilence, and your street, once home to 36 families, now houses fewer than a dozen survivors. The silence is perhaps the most unnerving change. No children's laughter, no tradesmen's calls, no gossip at the well. Just the occasional moan of the sick, the rumble of the death cart, and the constant tolling of church bells marking another soul's passage. You've survived so far, though you don't know why. Luck, God's will, some quirk of your body that resists the disease. You've watched the pious die alongside sinners, the strong alongside the weak. There seems no rhyme or reason to who lives and who dies. This arbitrariness is perhaps the final insult, that even righteous living offers no protection. Food grows scarce, markets have closed, fields lie untended. You've begun eating things you would have once discarded, moldy bread scraped clean, rancid meat with the worst parts cut away. Starvation stalks behind the plague, ready to claim those who escaped the pestilence itself. The few authorities still functioning have implemented desperate measures. Some towns bar their gates to all travelers. Ships are turned away from ports without being allowed to dock. In some places, entire houses are boarded up once plague is discovered inside, leaving the healthy trapped with the sick to either survive or perish together. You've heard rumors of villages burning their own dead in great pyres because no one remains with strength to dig graves. You find yourself doing things that would have been unthinkable before. Yesterday, you took a loaf of bread from a dead man's house. Last week, you pretended not to hear the cries of a feverish child calling for water as you hurried past her home. Self-preservation has narrowed your world to a pinpoint, concern for others a luxury you can no longer afford. At night, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, you listen to the sounds of your dying world and wonder if anything will ever be the same again. You've begun to understand why people whisper that this must truly be the end of days, God's final judgment on a sinful world. What else could explain such comprehensive devastation? You find your hands constantly moving to your neck, your armpits, your groin, checking for the first sign of swelling, the first indication that the invisible killer has found you too. Every headache, every moment of fatigue triggers a wave of terror. Is this the beginning of the end? The sunrise brings no comfort. Another day of survival merely means another day to fear. The plague has infected not just bodies, but minds, souls, the very fabric of society itself. Even if you survive, and the odds remain grimly against you, you'll live in a world populated more by ghosts than people, a world where trust has died alongside millions of victims. You hear the rumble of the death cart approaching again. This time, it stops outside your door. Was that a twinge of pain you just felt beneath your arm? The Black Death eventually receded, leaving a world fundamentally transformed. Between 1/3 and 1/2 of everyone you ever knew died in the span of a few months. Entire families vanished. Some villages disappeared completely, never to be reoccupied, becoming ghost towns reclaimed by nature. Those who survived emerged into a changed economic reality. With so many dead, labor suddenly became valuable. Peasants could demand better treatment, better pay. Land lay abandoned, available to those who had never hoped to own any. The rigid social hierarchy bent, cracked, but didn't break entirely, a taste of possibility amid devastation. But the true change was psychological, spiritual. How could you ever feel safe again? How could you trust that following religious obligations would protect you when you watched the most pious die alongside the sinful? The plague took more than lives. It took certainty, security, faith in the ordered nature of the world. And most terrifyingly, it never truly left. The plague returned, again and again and again. Every generation experienced outbreaks, sometimes localized, sometimes widespread. You might survive one epidemic only to see your children claimed by the next. The shadow never lifted completely. It merely retreated temporarily, always ready to return. This wasn't just history happening to someone else. This was your world destroyed and partially rebuilt, only to face destruction again. This was learning to live with perpetual uncertainty, with the knowledge that invisible killers might be carried into your home on the body of a flea, in the breath of a loved one, in goods brought from affected areas. The Black Death wasn't just a historical event. It was an apocalypse that happened in slow motion, reshaping everything about what it meant to be human in a world where life remained brutally cheap, where joy was fleeting, and where death, in its most horrific form, might come calling again with the next turning of the seasons. Sleep well tonight in your clean, heated home, with your antibiotics in hospitals and understanding of germ theory. But remember, the bacteria that caused the Black Death still exists. The world you now inhabit, with its certainties and securities, is newer and more fragile than you realize. What happened once could, with the wrong combination of factors, happen again. The medieval nightmare you've just experienced was reality for your ancestors, and could, with cruel irony, become reality again. The next time you feel a swollen lymph node, a sudden fever, take a moment to remember how recently humanity lived in terror of such symptoms. How quickly the veneer of civilization can crack when faced with unstoppable, incomprehensible death. How fortunate you are to live after, rather than during, humanity's darkest biological catastrophe. At least, for now. Typhus, the fever that made hell seem clean. You awaken in darkness, your nostrils immediately assaulted by the familiar stench of your existence. It's not one smell, but many. The fetid reek of the open waste bucket in the corner, overflowing again because no one dared venture outside during last night's freezing rain. The acrid smoke from the dying peat fire that stings your eyes and coats your lungs with black phlegm. The musty decay of the damp straw mattress beneath you, rotting from years of spilled fluids and swarming with vermin. The unwashed bodies of your family members, their skin bearing the accumulated grime of months without bathing. The festering wound on your father's leg that weeps yellow pus and has turned the color of spoiled meat. This symphony of stenches isn't unusual or remarkable. This is simply how your world smells. Every day, every night, from birth until merciful death. You cough, dislodging a glob of black-flecked phlegm that you wipe on the earth floor beneath you. The ceiling of your hovel is so low you can't stand upright, and years of smoke from the central hearth have coated every surface with sticky black residue. You've never seen the original color of the rough-hewn beams. In one corner, mushrooms have begun sprouting from a particularly damp section of wall, where rainwater seeps through the crumbling wattle and daub. Moving carefully to avoid disturbing the chickens that roost in the rafters, their droppings fall randomly throughout the day onto your food, bedding, and sometimes directly onto your family members. You sit up on your shared sleeping platform. The rough wool of your clothing scratches against open sores on your back, and you scratch reflexively at the constant, maddening itch that covers your entire body. Your scratching dislodges a small army of lice, which quickly scurry back into the seams of the single set of clothes you've worn continuously since autumn began. You've never seen yourself completely clean or free of vermin. The lice are as much a part of your body as your hair or fingernails. Everyone you know carries these tiny blood drinkers. The constant itching is simply part of being alive. But this morning, as you rake your filthy, broken nails across your scalp and feel the familiar wet warmth of fresh blood where you've scratched too hard, you don't realize that death has just entered your bloodstream. With that simple, unconscious gesture, you've sealed your fate. The body louse that just defecated on your scalp as you scratched carried something deadlier than mere irritation. These particular lice that have colonized your family, and indeed your entire village, have been infected with typhus. The louse's feces, ground into the open wound on your scalp by your own fingernails, contain the bacteria Rickettsia prowazekii, which now enters your bloodstream in a gruesome communion of filth and disease. This is typhus in its element, a disease perfectly evolved to exploit the unimaginable squalor of your medieval existence. Unlike the exotic Black Death that arrived on foreign ships, typhus emerges from the very conditions of your daily life. It is the inevitable harvest of seeds planted by human crowding, non-existent hygiene, and the constant companionship of parasites. Look around your home as you rise to begin another day of misery. Every element of your environment has conspired to make typhus not just possible, but inevitable. The single room where your entire family lives, sleeps, eats, and sometimes dies houses 8 human bodies pressed together for warmth at night on a shared sleeping platform. The ideal environment for lice to travel from body to body, for infected feces to be ground into countless small wounds from scratching. The straw on your floor hasn't been changed in months, creating a fermenting carpet of human and animal waste, food scraps, parasites, and the accumulated filth of daily existence. Each step releases clouds of dust, comprised partially of dried louse feces, dust you inhale with every breath that settles on the meager food you'll consume today. Your clothing, woolen, rough, unchanged for months because you own nothing else, provides the perfect habitat for body lice to lay their eggs in the seams. The heat of your body incubates new generations of parasites every few weeks. You don't realize it, but as many as 1,000 lice may live on your body and clothes at any time. Their constant biting creates a landscape of small wounds across your skin, each one a potential entry point for typhus bacteria. The water you drink, hauled from a communal well, contaminated by seepage from nearby cesspits, carries its own deadly microorganisms. Your perpetually compromised gut, home to multiple varieties of worms that steal nutrients from the little food you consume, weakens your body's defenses against new invaders. Even the air you breathe conspires against you. The smoke-filled interior of your home, without chimney or effective ventilation, has damaged your lungs since infancy. Your chronic cough, shared by everyone you know, further depletes your body's reserves before typhus even begins its assault. This disease isn't an outside invader, but the inevitable product of how you live. If a demonic architect designed the perfect incubation system for typhus, it would look exactly like your daily existence. For the next week, you continue your miserable routine, unaware of the microbiological time bomb ticking in your blood. You haul water from the contaminated well, gather firewood from the increasingly distant forest, herd the sickly sheep through muddy fields where human waste is used as fertilizer. Each night, you return to your filthy hovel, eat a thin gruel of moldy rye and whatever withered vegetables could be found, and collapse onto your rotting sleeping platform, surrounded by the rasping breathing of your chronically ill family members. Then, one morning, you wake to a world transformed by agony. The fever hits you like a physical blow. One moment you were asleep. The next, you're conscious but trapped in a body that has become your enemy. Your temperature soars so high that your mother, placing her filth-encrusted hand on your forehead, yanks it back as though burned. The heat radiating from your skin seems impossible for a living body to produce. Through cracked lips, you beg for water, your tongue so swollen it distorts your words. But worse than the consuming heat is the pain that has claimed every muscle in your body. This isn't the familiar ache of labor or the discomfort of sleeping on hard surfaces. This is torment beyond imagining, as though your very sinews are being slowly torn from bone. Your joints feel filled with broken shards of metal, grinding with each slight movement. Even breathing becomes an exercise in endurance as your chest muscles scream in protest with each shallow inhalation. The headache transcends anything you've experienced before. It's not located in one place, but seems to fill your entire skull with pulsing agony. Each heartbeat sends waves of excruciating pressure behind your eyes, so intense that bursts of light flash across your vision. The dim interior of your hovel, barely lit by the small fire, and what little sunlight filters through the smoke hole, seems blindingly bright. You moan and try to cover your eyes, but even that small movement sends lightning bolts of pain through your arms. You lie on your filthy sleeping platform, surrounded by the normal sounds of your household, the chickens scratching in the rotting straw, your siblings fighting over a crust of moldy bread, your father's hacking cough that has never improved since winter. But you can no longer participate in even this meager existence. The typhus has claimed you completely, imprisoned you within a cage of pain. As the fever rages, your thoughts become confused. Your mother's face melts and reforms when she bends over you, transforming momentarily into a demonic visage that makes you shriek in terror. The rough wooden beams of the ceiling seem to writhe like serpents. You hear voices speaking in languages that don't exist, sometimes shouting, sometimes whispering unspeakable secrets directly into your mind. By the third day, you've lost control of your bodily functions. You lie in your own waste, too weak to move, too delirious to care about the humiliation. The stench adds yet another note to the symphony of foulness that defines your home. But no one complains. They simply pull their ragged clothes over their noses when they approach, their eyes showing a mixture of pity and fear, and something else you can still recognize even through your fever, resignation. They've seen this before. They know what comes next. On the fifth day of your torment, the spots appear. They emerge first on your chest and abdomen, small pink macules like evil freckles scattered across your skin. Within hours, they multiply and darken, spreading across your body in a grotesque constellation. By evening, they've transformed into a deeper red, almost purple in places where they've begun to merge into larger patches. The spotted fever, your grandmother whispers when she thinks you're unconscious. Just like the Miller's family last winter, all dead within a fortnight. What you can't see is the true danger. Similar hemorrhages are forming throughout your internal organs. The typhus bacteria attack the endothelial cells lining your blood vessels, causing them to leak. Microscopic bleeds occur in your brain, heart, kidneys, and lungs. Each tiny hemorrhage damages these vital structures and contributes to the systemic collapse of your body's functions. Your urine, when it comes, is dark and scant, signaling that your kidneys are failing. Your breathing becomes more labored as fluid accumulates in your lungs. Your heart races, then falters, its rhythm becoming erratic as the microbleeds damage its specialized conduction pathways. The mental deterioration becomes more pronounced. You no longer recognize family members. Your mother, who has barely left your side despite the risk to herself, becomes a stranger to you, sometimes an angel, sometimes a monster who you fight against with what little strength remains. You babble in languages that don't exist, carrying on conversations with people long dead or never born. Your eyes, once clear, take on a disturbing appearance that has given typhus another of its many names: jail fever. The whites become suffused with blood from broken capillaries, and your normally reactive pupils now stare fixedly, giving you the vacant gaze associated with the disease. This typhus stare is so distinctive that experienced observers can diagnose the disease with a single glance. By the end of the first week, you exist in a twilight realm between life and death. Your consciousness comes and goes like the tide, each period of lucidity shorter than the last. During these brief moments of clarity, the pain reasserts itself so violently that you pray for the return of delirium or the final release of death. Your body, never well nourished to begin with, begins to consume itself. The relentless fever burns through what few fat reserves you had, then turns to muscle tissue for fuel. Your ribs become more prominent, your cheeks hollow out, your arms and legs resemble sticks covered with mottled skin. This rapid wasting gives typhus victims their characteristic appearance, emaciated but with the distinctive rash, like walking corpses marked by death's fingers. The stench emanating from your body changes, taking on the sweet, sour odor distinctive to typhus victims. It combines the smell of unwashed flesh, infected urine, and the unique metabolic byproducts of the disease itself. Anyone who has encountered typhus before recognizes this smell instantly, a harbinger of likely death and possible contagion. In your lucid moments, which grow rarer as the disease progresses, you become aware of changes in your household. Your father no longer sleeps on the shared platform, but has moved to the far side of your single room. Your younger siblings are sent to stay with neighbors, despite the hardship this imposes on already stretched resources. Only your mother remains in constant attendance, her face growing more haggard each time it swims into your field of vision. What you don't know, cannot comprehend in your fever-addled state, is that typhus has begun to spread through your household, then your street, then your entire village. The lice that feasted on your blood have migrated to new hosts through the inevitable close contact of medieval living. Some died on your clothes during your fever's highest points, their corpses still laden with bacteria, and were shaken loose onto your shared bedding, ready to be crushed and release their deadly contents onto new victims. By the beginning of the second week, your village has become a place of terror. The church bells toll continuously for the dead and dying. The priest, initially making rounds to administer last rites, has fallen ill himself. Those still healthy enough to walk avoid each other on the narrow, waste-filled street, covering their faces with vinegar-soaked rags in the vain hope of protection. Meanwhile, you have reached the crisis point of the disease. For most typhus victims, the second week determines their fate. Some, particularly the young and previously robust, begin to show signs of improvement. Their fevers, while still high, no longer reach the brain-cooking levels of the disease's peak. Periods of lucidity become longer. The pain, while still present, no longer dominates every moment of existence. Others, the elderly, the already ill, the malnourished, those with particularly virulent infections, deteriorate rapidly during this period. Pneumonia develops as secondary bacterial infections take hold in fluid-filled lungs. Kidney failure progresses until urine production stops completely. The heart, damaged by both the direct effects of typhus and the strain of prolonged fever, begins to fail. Seizures may occur as the brain suffers from both inflammation and oxygen deprivation. For you, hovering between these fates, each hour brings unknowable suffering. The thirst is perhaps the worst torment now. Your cracked lips bleed when you try to drink from the wooden cup your mother presses against them, and the small amount of liquid that makes it past your swollen tongue seems to evaporate before reaching your stomach. You would sell your soul for a single mouthful of clean, cool water, a luxury that has never existed in your world. Your mother's face appears above you, more gaunt than you remember, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep and constant exposure to the smoke-filled air of your hovel. Is that the flush of early fever on her cheeks? You try to speak, to warn her, but your voice emerges as a croak that triggers a coughing spasm so violent you fear your ribs will crack. As darkness falls on the 14th day of your ordeal, you feel a strange calm descend. The pain, your constant companion for what seems like eternity, recedes slightly. Your thoughts, though still disjointed, become clearer. You recognize your mother as she wipes your forehead with a rag soaked in vinegar, its harsh smell cutting through the miasma of disease. Is this recovery beginning, or is it the deceptive clarity that sometimes comes just before death? In the dim light of the single tallow candle your family can afford, it's impossible to tell if your rash has begun to fade or if the darkness simply masks its angry hue. Outside, the death cart rumbles past your door once again, its dreadful familiar creak momentarily drowning out the moans of other victims in nearby homes. Your mother makes the sign of the cross and mumbles a prayer that sounds more like desperate bargaining than religious devotion. As you drift between consciousness and oblivion, a terrible truth becomes clear. Whether you live or die, nothing will ever be the same. Typhus has transformed not just your body, but your entire world. The disease born from the filth and misery of medieval existence has become its most perfect expression, suffering distilled to its purest form, delivered through the most mundane of vectors. The real horror of typhus isn't that it's exceptional, but that it's inevitable, the natural culmination of how you live. The fever may break, but the conditions that created it remain, waiting to birth new agonies for the next generation born into this world of filth, vermin, and perpetual suffering. In the darkness, you hear your mother begin to cough. Smallpox, the disfigurer of generations. You're 5 winters old, and you can't stop staring at your mother's face, not because it's beautiful, though you love her fiercely, but because of the countless pits and scars that crater her skin like the surface of a grotesque moon. Her left eye is clouded, seeing nothing, and one side of her mouth pulls downward in a permanent grimace from scar tissue. When she smiles, the map of devastation shifts and warps like the surface of disturbed water. "Why does your face have holes?" you finally ask one day as she stirs the thin gruel that will serve as dinner for your family of 7. She doesn't flinch at the question. "The pox," she says simply. "I was one of the lucky ones." Lucky, with half her vision gone and a face that makes traveling merchants cross themselves when they see her. You don't understand, not yet, but you will. God help you, you will, because the pox is coming for you too. Smallpox doesn't skulk through your medieval world like an occasional visitor. It stands boldly in the town square, in the church, in the market, announcing its presence on the faces of survivors who bear its distinctive scars. Unlike the Black Death that arrives in terrifying waves before receding, unlike typhus that flares up when conditions become especially foul, smallpox remains a constant, prowling presence in your world. In your village of 200 souls, 20 show the characteristic pockmarks on their faces. 3, including the blacksmith, are completely blind, their corneas scarred by the disease. The tanner's daughter, once beautiful enough to attract suitors from 3 villages away, now hides her ravaged face beneath a hood, even in summer heat. The priest's voice has a permanent rasp, legacy of pustules that formed down his throat. These aren't rare cases or extraordinary outcomes. This is simply smallpox's tithe, its regular collection of flesh and beauty taken primarily from the young. Your oldest brother died of it before you were born. His name never mentioned, because speaking of the dead too often might call their spirits back, or so the old women claim. Your mother lost 2 siblings to it. Your father's pocked face shows he survived it, though he never speaks of his experience. In your medieval world, smallpox is childhood's most terrifying rite of passage. 3 in 10 children who contract it will die. Many survivors will be blinded, disfigured, or disabled. And virtually everyone will face it eventually. The disease so common that in some regions, parents deliberately expose young children to mild cases, hoping to get the inevitable infection over with early, before it can do maximum damage. You've been lucky so far, but luck in the medieval world is a thin and unreliable shield. When the pox returns each winter, spreading from household to household with the inexorability of God's judgment, you watch your parents exchange worried glances. Will this be the year it claims you? Your luck runs out when a traveling peddler stops in your village, his wares irresistible enough to draw a crowd despite the cold drizzle of early winter. You push through the throng, eager to glimpse the colored ribbons and small metal trinkets arrayed on his blanket. An old woman next to you coughs repeatedly, her breath visible in the chill air. You think nothing of it at the time. 10 days later, the disease's incubation period, you wake feeling unusual. Not dramatically ill like the sudden hammer blow of typhus, but distinctly unwell. Your head throbs dully. Your back aches in a way different from your usual pains. Food holds no appeal, which is significant in a world where hunger is your regular companion. Most telling, you feel exhaustion beyond normal tiredness, a bone-deep weariness that makes even sitting up require monumental effort. Your mother notices immediately. She's been watching for these signs in all her children with the vigilance of someone who has already sacrificed one child to this particular demon. She places a hand on your forehead, feels the heat beginning to build there, and her face tightens. Without a word, she moves your sleeping pallet away from your siblings into the corner farthest from the central hearth. Thus begins your isolation, not in a hospital with careful infection control and trained medical staff, But in the corner of your family's one-room hovel, where smoke from the cooking fire still stings your increasingly sensitive eyes, where the smell of your siblings' unwashed bodies and the family's waste bucket still assault your nostrils, where rats still scrabble in the thatch above your head at night. By evening, your fever climbs sharply. Your skin feels stretched too tight across your bones, burning from within. The family's single tallow candle seems blindingly bright, sending spikes of pain through your eyes and into your brain. Every muscle and joint in your body aches, as though you've been beaten with sticks. Your mother dribbles water between your cracked lips, her expression carefully blank, giving nothing away. The fever before the storm, she murmurs to your father later when they think you're asleep. You don't understand what she means, not yet. On the third day of fever, the true horror begins, the event that gives smallpox its name and its terrifying reputation. Small red spots appear on your tongue and in your mouth. They're not particularly painful yet, just unusual enough for you to probe them with your tongue, feeling their slightly raised edges. By evening, similar spots appear on your face, spreading rapidly across your forehead, cheeks, and chin. Through the night, they multiply and march downward, colonizing your neck, chest, back, and limbs in relentless progression. The rash is initially flat, resembling flea bites more than anything truly alarming. But over the next 24 hours, these spots transform. Each tiny red macule becomes a raised papule, firm to the touch and intensely painful. Your skin, already burning with fever, now feels as though it's being repeatedly stabbed with hot needles wherever the raised spots appear. Their distribution is cruel, heaviest on your face, hands, and forearms, the most visible parts of your body, as though the disease intentionally targets your identity and social presentation. By day 5, the raised papules undergo another terrifying metamorphosis, transforming into vesicles, small blisters filled with clear fluid. Your face becomes a landscape of alien protrusions, each one a glistening dome of agony. These vesicles are deeply embedded in your skin, giving it a texture like rough seeds, just under the surface. When your fever-dry lips crack open, you taste blood mixed with the fluid from vesicles that have formed in your mouth. Don't scratch, your mother warns constantly, watching you with red-rimmed eyes from the other side of your single room. It makes the scars worse. But the itching is almost as unbearable as the pain. Each vesicle seems to have its own pulse, its own personality of torment. You lie on your filthy pallet, tears cutting tracks through the grime on your face, hands clenched into fists to prevent scratching, failing often despite your best efforts. The worst is yet to come. Around day 7, the clear fluid inside each vesicle transforms, becoming cloudy, thick, yellow-white pus, as your body battles the virus replicating within these fluid-filled chambers. The vesicles are now pustules, tense, dome-shaped pockets of infection that make your skin appear as though it's erupting from within. The pain reaches a crescendo that makes your previous suffering seem mild by comparison. These pustules aren't separate entities, but connected beneath your skin in a subcutaneous network of agony. When you move, even slightly, the pull and stretch of skin makes them shift against each other, sending lightning bolts of fresh torment through your already tortured nerves. The smell emerges now, distinctive, sickly sweet and foul, a mixture of congealing pus and infected skin that adds yet another layer of suffering. Your family tries not to show their disgust, but you see your younger siblings covering their noses when they glance in your direction. They've been warned to stay away, but in your single-room dwelling, real isolation is impossible. The crowning horror comes when pustules form on your palms and soles, locations with particularly dense nerve endings. Each pustule there creates pain so intense it makes you scream when anything touches these surfaces. You can't walk, can't grip, can't bear even the touch of the rough blanket against these areas. Every bodily function becomes an exercise in negotiating unimaginable pain. Worse still are the pustules that have formed on your eyes. Each blink feels like grinding sand against your most sensitive tissues. Light becomes an enemy, sending spikes of agony through your suppurating corneas. Many smallpox victims are blinded when these pustules leave permanent scars on their corneas, a fate you're still too young to truly comprehend, but which would transform your already limited prospects from difficult to nearly impossible. The pustules in your mouth and throat make eating and drinking tortuous. Each swallow feels like forcing broken glass down your esophagus. You begin to dehydrate simply because drinking causes such agony, creating a dangerous downward spiral as your body struggles to fight the infection with insufficient fluids. Around day 10, with your body a continuous landscape of suppurating pustules, you reach the crisis point of smallpox. This is when death claims many victims, not dramatically like the Black Death's final hemorrhages or Typhus's delirious end, but through the cumulative effects of dehydration, secondary bacterial infections invading through broken skin, and the viral load's impact on vital organs. Your fever, which had briefly receded when the rash first appeared, returns with renewed vengeance. Your heart races, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Your mother, who has barely slept since your illness began, wipes your forehead with a rag soaked in vinegar, her touch so gentle it feels like butterfly wings against your tortured skin. The priest visits, his own pockmarked face grave, as he administers what may be your last rites. The prayer for the sick becomes the prayer for the dying, with only the change of a few words. You're too lost in fevered agony to notice the transition. Through this haze of suffering, you become aware of your mother singing softly, the same lullaby she sang when you were an infant. Her voice cracks with exhaustion and fear, but she continues hour after hour, as though her song could form a shield between you and death itself. Time loses meaning in this purgatory of pustules and pain. Days and nights blur together, marked only by the changing light through the single small window of your hovel and the rotation of family members who tend to you while others work the fields or perform household tasks. Your father, normally stoic to the point of seeming emotionless, weeps silently when he thinks no one is watching. Then, imperceptibly at first, the tide begins to turn. The pustules, having reached their maximum development, stop growing. Your fever, while still high, no longer spikes to delirium-inducing levels. The pain remains undiminished, but a dangerous corner has been turned. You will be among the 7 out of 10 who survive. Around day 14, the pustules begin to dry out, forming hard crusts over your entire body. These scabs itch with maddening intensity, an itching far worse than the lice that normally inhabit your unwashed hair and clothing. The impulse to scratch becomes almost irresistible, though your mother ties soft rags around your hands at night to prevent unconscious scratching that would deepen the inevitable scarring. Each scratch is a scar that never leaves, she warns, her single good eye fixed intently on your face. And the face scars last longest. The crusts begin to fall off around day 21, revealing the landscape of devastation beneath. Your smooth child skin is gone forever, replaced by a topography of pits and scars. Each pustule leaves its signature, a depressed area where the virus destroyed skin cells so completely that they cannot regenerate normally. The deepest craters occur where pustules merged, or where scratching introduced secondary infections that increased the damage. Your reflection in a bowl of still water shows a stranger, a child with a face that looks decades older, mapped with hundreds of pockmarks that will never fully heal. In the medieval world, with no corrective surgery, no advanced dermatological treatments, these scars are your permanent identity, visible proof that you survived one of humanity's most dreaded diseases. But the physical scars are only the beginning of smallpox's legacy. As the weeks of recovery stretch into months, other consequences emerge. Your once sharp eyesight has deteriorated, your corneas permanently clouded where pustules formed directly on your eyes. You squint to see details that were previously clear, a disability that will limit your already narrow options for future work. The pustules that formed in your ears have left you with diminished hearing, particularly on your right side. Those that erupted in your nose have damaged your sense of smell. The ones in your throat, healed with scarring, that gives your voice a permanent rasp, making you sound like an old crone, though you've barely 6 summers behind you. More dangerous still are the invisible damages. Your heart, strained by weeks of fever and fighting infection, beats with occasional irregularity. A flutter you feel in quiet moments that makes you momentarily dizzy. Your lungs, compromised by pustules that formed in your airways, leave you short of breath with even mild exertion. These internal scars may ultimately limit your lifespan far more than the visible ones limit your prospects. In the months that follow, your hair falls out in patches where pustules formed on your scalp. Some areas regrow, others remain permanently bald. Your fingernails and toenails, damaged at the matrix by pustules that formed around your nail beds, regrow deformed, ridged, split, and thickened in ways that make fine manipulation more difficult. The psychological impact is impossible to quantify in a world without mental health concepts, but its effects are no less real. You flinch when strangers look at you too long. You become accustomed to the quick aversion of eyes when someone new encounters your ravaged face. Children who haven't yet learned social constraints sometimes point or ask loud questions about your appearance. Adults merely pretend not to notice while clearly cataloging your disfigurement. Your survival should be celebrated, and it is within your family, but it comes with a heavy price. In your medieval world, physical appearance determines many aspects of your future. Marriage prospects, certain types of work, social standing, all are influenced by the map of scars that now defines your face and body. Your individual suffering, multiplied across millions of victims over centuries, made smallpox one of history's great sculptors of human experience. In your medieval village, everyone's life is touched by the disease, either through personal suffering, the loss of loved ones, or the omnipresent visual reminder of survivors with their characteristic scars. Smallpox doesn't just kill on an industrial scale, though it does that with terrifying efficiency, claiming as many as 300 million lives in the 20th century alone before its eradication. It also transforms societies through selective pressure, through economic impact, and through the sheer psychological weight of a disease that leaves its signature permanently emblazoned on its survivors' faces. Royal successions changed when heirs died of smallpox or were deemed unsuitable due to extensive disfigurement. Beautiful children became unmarriageable adults after severe cases. Entire indigenous populations collapsed when Europeans inadvertently, or sometimes deliberately, introduced the disease to previously unexposed groups. In your medieval world, smallpox creates a specific kind of fatalism, a recognition that no family, regardless of wealth or status, is immune to this particular leveler. When the disease moves through your village each winter, it takes children from hovels and manors alike, leaves its scars on peasant and noble faces with equal disregard for social distinction. This democratic devastation shapes religious understanding, medical practices, and cultural responses. Smallpox goddesses are worshipped in some cultures. Saints are petitioned for protection in others. Elaborate rituals develop around preventing or treating the disease, some merely ineffective, others actively harmful, like placing sufferers near hot fires to drive out the disease, which only increases their deadly dehydration. For you, recovering in your family's smoky, vermin-infested hovel, these larger implications mean nothing. Your world has contracted to the immediate reality of pain, disfigurement, and the long, slow path back to some version of normal functioning. The disease has forever altered your identity, both internally and in the eyes of others. When spring finally arrives and you're strong enough to venture outside again, you squint in the brightness that your damaged eyes can no longer fully tolerate. Village children stare at your transformed appearance before their parents shush them. Adults offer congratulations on your survival that don't quite mask their horror at your appearance. You catch your reflection in a rain puddle and flinch from the stranger looking back at you. This is your new reality, one shared by millions of smallpox survivors throughout history. You've joined the ranks of the marked, the survivors, whose faces tell the story of humanity's ancient enemy. At night, you hear your mother praying fervently that your younger siblings might be spared your fate. But in your world, without vaccination or effective treatment, her prayers have little chance of being answered. Smallpox, the great disfigurer, will almost certainly return to your household, to your village, patient, persistent, and merciless in its collection of flesh and beauty. You trace the largest crater on your cheek with one finger, feeling its permanent depression in what was once smooth skin. "I was one of the lucky ones," you whisper, finally understanding what your mother meant. In the medieval world, this is what luck looks like. Survival at terrible cost, in a game where many lose everything. Dysentery, the bloody flux of medieval existence. The first cramp hits you like a dagger to the gut. You're in the field, bent double over your scythe, when pain slices through your abdomen with such sudden violence that you drop to your knees in the mud. The second cramp follows almost immediately, twisting your insides with a force that draws an involuntary groan from your cracked lips. Around you, your fellow peasants barely glance up from their labors. They've seen this before. They know what's coming. You struggle to your feet, leaning heavily on your scythe, and feel the first urgent gurgle from your bowels. Something is very wrong inside you. There's barely time to stumble toward the edge of the field before your body betrays you completely. You drop your tool and run, but you're too late. Warm liquid floods your threadbare braize, running down your legs as you desperately try to reach the cover of nearby bushes. But this isn't just the usual watery evacuation that occasionally strikes after eating spoiled food. When you finally manage to squat and fully release your bowels, what emerges is streaked with bright red blood and carries a stench so foul it makes your eyes water. You've just experienced the first symptoms of dysentery, the bloody flux that has killed more soldiers, peasants, pilgrims, and nobles than many of history's famous battles combined. In your medieval world of non-existent sanitation, contaminated water, and rudimentary medical knowledge, this disease is not an exotic visitor, but an ever-present neighbor, always ready to turn your own body into its weapon of execution. And it has just chosen you as its next victim. Unlike the Black Death with its dramatic buboes or smallpox with its distinctive pustules, dysentery emerges directly from the conditions of everyday medieval life. It isn't caused by an exotic bacterium imported on trading ships or carried by unusual vectors. It is the inevitable result of how you live, eat, drink, and dispose of waste. Look around your village. The central well where everyone draws water sits less than 50 paces from the communal midden heap where household waste accumulates. After heavy rains, dark liquid leaches from this pile of rotting matter, forming rivulets that eventually seep into the ground, the same ground that feeds the well. The pigs that roam freely through the village streets consume human excrement, then defecate wherever they stand. Children play in this same mud, their unwashed hands later touching food or entering their mouths. Your own home magnifies these dangers. The single room where your entire family lives has an earthen floor covered with rushes that haven't been changed in months. These rushes contain everything that has been dropped, spilled, or tracked in. Food scraps, animal waste, mud from the streets, and human excretions from the very young and very old who cannot always make it outside to relieve themselves. The resulting fermented carpet releases clouds of contaminated dust with every footstep. Your waste bucket, used during the night or inclement weather, is emptied each morning just outside your door, the contents joining those of your neighbors to create small cesspools that attract flies. These same flies then land on your food, their legs carrying microscopic particles of fecal matter directly to your mouth. Water, the most basic necessity of life, is perhaps your greatest danger. You've never seen clean water as modern humans would recognize it. The brook that runs near your village receives the runoff from fields fertilized with human waste. The rain barrel collects water that is washed across thatch roofs, housing colonies of birds and their droppings. Even the well water, which appears clear, teems with invisible pathogens from seeping cesspits and inadequate sealing against groundwater contamination. In this environment, dysentery isn't an accident or a rare misfortune, it's a mathematical certainty. The only questions are when it will strike and how severely. The specific attack that now begins to ravage your insides could have come from multiple sources. Perhaps it was the water you drank this morning, collected from the river because the well was crowded. Perhaps it was the partially cooked meat from the communal stew pot that has been simmering for days at temperatures insufficient to kill all pathogens. Maybe it was the unwashed hands of the person who gave you a piece of bread at midday meal. It could even have been your own fingers, contaminated after wiping yourself with leaves following your last bowel movement. In your medieval world, you're perpetually surrounded by a perfect circle of filth, your own waste and that of others constantly finding its way back into your body through water, food, and casual contact. Dysentery isn't an invader, But the natural culmination of this cycle, the physical manifestation of the invisible filth that permeates every aspect of your existence. The cramps that brought you to your knees in the field were merely the opening salvo in Dysentery's campaign against your body. As you stumble back toward your hovel, doubled over and already weakened, the true assault begins. The next evacuation comes with almost no warning, a sudden, overwhelming urge, followed by an explosive release that you can't possibly control. This isn't normal diarrhea, but something far more violent. Your body forcefully expelling everything within your intestinal tract in a torrent that splashes your legs and feet. The blood content has increased, changing from streaks to a more uniform reddish-brown that looks disturbingly like the watery runoff from a butcher's block. The smell defies description, not just the usual foul odor of excrement, but something uniquely putrid, metallic from the blood, and carrying the distinctive stench of infected tissue. It's so powerful that you gag, nearly vomiting, as your body revolts against the evidence of its own decay. More shocking than the blood or smell is the frequency. Within the first hour, you've emptied your bowels 5 times, each evacuation more urgent and less controllable than the last. By the time you reach your home, your legs are smeared with bloody discharge, your clothing soaked through. There is no controlling this, no holding back. Your body has declared war on itself. Inside your hovel, your family reacts with a mixture of concern and fear. They've seen dysentery before. Everyone has. Your mother quickly spreads a straw pallet in the corner, farthest from the food preparation area, covering it with the family's oldest blanket, one already too worn and stained for regular use. This will be your place for the duration of your illness. Night brings no relief. The evacuations continue relentlessly, 10, 15, 20 times over the course of hours. Each one begins with cramping, so severe it makes you cry out, drawing sleepy complaints from siblings whose rest you're disturbing. Each release provides only moments of relief before the cycle begins again. By morning, you can no longer make it outside, or even to the household waste bucket. Your parents, understanding the progression, place a shallow wooden bowl beside your pallet. Your dignity, already compromised by medieval communal living, now disappears completely as you evacuate into this makeshift bedpan in full view of your family. What emerges now has changed again. Along with blood and liquid stool, you see shreds of whitish-gray material, pieces of your intestinal lining sloughing off as the infection destroys the delicate tissues of your colon. This is dysentery's most dangerous effect, the literal dissolution of your gut from within. The pain has transformed as well. No longer limited to cramping before evacuations, it has become a constant, burning agony throughout your abdomen. Your rectum, subjected to the constant passage of acidic, bloody discharge, feels flayed and raw. Even the gentlest cleaning with rags causes pain so intense you sob openly. Fever arrives on the second day, adding a new dimension to your suffering. Your body alternates between burning heat that makes you throw off even the thin blanket and violent shivering that shatters your teeth and shakes your frame against the hard-packed earth floor. The fever accelerates the dehydration already well underway from your constant fluid loss. Thirst becomes your new obsession. Your tongue feels swollen, your lips crack and bleed, your throat so dry it clicks when you swallow. You beg constantly for water, but drinking triggers immediate evacuation, your damaged intestines unable to absorb the fluid before violently expelling it. It's a cruel paradox. You're simultaneously drowning in your body's liquids and dying of thirst. By the third day, weakness overtakes you completely. You can no longer rise, even to use the wooden bowl. Your evacuations come with increasing frequency, but diminishing volume as your body depletes its reserves. The smell from your corner becomes so unbearable that your younger siblings are sent to stay with neighbors, despite the hardship this imposes on already stretched resources. Your abdomen becomes distended and exquisitely tender to even the lightest touch. Each breath sends ripples of pain through your gut. The constant evacuations have left your anal area excoriated and bleeding on its own, adding external misery to the internal destruction. Without modern creams or even basic comfort measures, this chafing becomes its own unique torture. Worse than the physical agony is the growing awareness of what's happening. Unlike external wounds that can be seen and treated, dysentery consumes you from within, invisible except in its bloody evacuations. You're literally melting from the inside out, your vital organs shutting down as dehydration and electrolyte imbalances reach critical levels. Even in your fever-addled state, you recognize the concerned glances your parents exchange when they think you're not watching. You've seen enough deaths in your short life to know when adults have given up hope. The priest has been called, arriving with a cloth held over his nose and mouth, standing at the maximum possible distance while administering last rites. His haste to complete the ritual and escape your stench would be offensive if you had any dignity left to wound. By the fourth day, the true killer in dysentery reveals itself fully. Dehydration so profound, it can no longer be reversed by medieval means. Your body has lost fluids at a catastrophic rate. Not just water, but crucial electrolytes necessary for nerve function, heart rhythm, and cellular processes. The physical changes become dramatically visible. Your eyes sink into their sockets, surrounded by dark circles that make you look decades older. Your skin loses all elasticity. When pinched, it remains tented rather than springing back into place. Your lips shrivel. Your tongue develops deep fissures that bleed when you try to speak. The soft spot at the top of an infant's skull would be deeply depressed if you were a baby. As an adult, all your features seem to collapse inward as your body consumes itself in a desperate bid for survival. Your heart, struggling to pump blood that has become increasingly thick from fluid loss, races at first, then develops an irregular rhythm that causes moments of dizziness even as you lie motionless. Your kidneys, attempting to conserve what little fluid remains, shut down gradually. Your urine, when it comes at all, is scant and dark amber, carrying a powerful ammonia smell that adds another note to the symphony of stenches emanating from your corner. The most terrifying symptom comes when your muscles begin to cramp, not just your intestines now, but your limbs, neck, and back. These aren't mild Charlie horses, but violent contractions that arch your spine and contort your hands into claws. These seizure-like spasms signal critical electrolyte imbalances that presage the final stages of dehydration. Your mind, already compromised by fever and pain, begins to slip further as your brain suffers from inadequate blood flow and oxygen. You see things that aren't there, figures moving in the shadows of your hovel, strange patterns in the smoke-blackened thatch. Overhead, familiar faces morph into grotesque masks when family members lean over you. Your hearing alternates between muffled silence and hypersensitivity, where normal household sounds become painfully loud. The evacuations continue, though now they're mostly blood and mucus with little solid material. Your body has nothing left to give, yet the disease demands more. The infection has created ulcers throughout your colon that continue to bleed, the damaged tissue unable to heal while the bacteria keep multiplying. Your father, desperate to save you, trades a prized knife for a visit from the local wise woman. She arrives with a pouch of herbs that she brews into a foul-smelling tea, forcing it between your cracked lips. The liquid, like everything before it, passes through your system almost unchanged, your intestines too damaged to absorb any beneficial components that might exist among her questionable remedies. She also brings a poultice of moldy bread mixed with spider webs that she applies to your abdomen. The weight of even this light covering causes such pain that you cry out, your voice now a raspy whisper from dehydration. She nods knowingly at your reaction, as though your agony confirms her diagnosis, rather than simply reflecting the advanced state of your illness. The flux has gone deep, she pronounces, accepting payment and backing toward the door. Keep giving the tea. If he lives through tomorrow, he may recover. Her tone makes clear she doesn't expect this outcome. Night falls again, bringing no relief. You drift between consciousness and a state that isn't quite sleep, but rather a delirious half-awareness filled with nightmarish visions. The pain has become so constant that it's now part of your identity, inseparable from your sense of self. Your mother sits beside you in the darkness, wiping your forehead with a damp cloth, though water has become precious as the household well begins to dry in the summer heat. This small kindness, the cool touch against your burning skin, becomes your only tether to the world of the living as dysentery drags you ever closer to death's threshold. While you struggle for each breath in your darkened corner, dysentery continues its march through your village. Your case isn't isolated, but part of a larger outbreak that occurs with grim regularity in your medieval world. The same well that likely infected you continues to serve other families. The same flies that carried bacteria to your food find new meals to contaminate. Dysentery doesn't announce itself with the drama of the Black Death or the distinctive markings of smallpox. It moves quietly, killing one by one, taking primarily the vulnerable, the very young, the very old, those already weakened by hunger or labor. It doesn't create the immediate panic of more visible plagues, but its cumulative death toll rivals or exceeds these more famous killers. In the neighboring hovel, an infant wails continuously, its cries growing weaker as the same bloody flux drains its tiny body of fluids. The child's mother, herself recovering from childbirth and lacking the nutrition to produce adequate milk, can only watch helplessly as her baby withers. By morning, the wailing will have stopped forever. 3 houses away, an elderly man who survived the Black Death decades ago now faces his end from this more mundane killer. His aged body, already marginally hydrated in the best of times, cannot withstand the massive fluid losses. His daughters take turns sitting with him, wiping blood from his beard after each evacuation, praying for a mercy that seems increasingly unlikely. Even the Lord's Manor is not immune. Though they drink from a separate well and eat better food, the fundamental sanitation problems affect all social classes. The Lord's youngest son, a boy of 4 winters, has been stricken. Despite having access to a physician, a luxury unimaginable for common villagers, the child receives treatment scarcely more effective than the wise woman's herbs. The doctor prescribes bloodletting to balance the humors, further depleting the already critically dehydrated child. By evening, the manor's bells will toll, announcing another young life cut short. What makes dysentery particularly devastating is its tendency to create cycles of infection within households and communities. Unlike diseases that generate immunity after recovery, dysentery can strike the same person repeatedly. Your own mother suffered 3 separate bouts last summer, each one leaving her weaker. Some villagers experience the bloody flux every year when summer heat accelerates the growth of bacteria in water sources. The disease's impact extends beyond its direct mortality. Survivors are left severely weakened, unable to work at full capacity for weeks or months. In your agricultural community, where the narrow window of harvest can determine survival through winter, this debilitation can doom entire families to starvation months after the acute infection has passed. Children who survive repeated episodes often develop stunted growth and cognitive impairments from the combined effects of dehydration, malnutrition, as their damaged intestines struggle to absorb nutrients, and the physiological stress of chronic illness. Their compromised bodies become more vulnerable to other infections, creating a cascade of health problems that may ultimately prove fatal even years after the initial dysentery infection. Dawn breaks on your 5th day of illness, light filtering through the small smoke hole in your hovel's roof. You remain alive, though the word barely applies to your current state. Your evacuation frequency has finally decreased, not from improvement, but because your body has nothing left to expel. The wooden bowl beside your pallet contains only small amounts of blood-tinged mucus from your last attempts at evacuation. Your breathing has become shallow and rapid. Your pulse flutters weakly at your wrist, sometimes seeming to pause between beats. Your skin has taken on a grayish hue, your lips and nail beds showing the faint blue tinge of inadequate oxygen. These are the classic signs of hypovolemic shock, the final common pathway of severe dehydration from any cause. Your family has gathered, sensing the approaching end. Your father, usually stoic, clasps your mother's hand tightly as they watch each labored breath. Your siblings, brought back from the neighbors for what everyone assumes are final goodbyes, stand awkwardly at the foot of your pallet, uncertain how to respond to your transformed appearance. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, something changes. The cramps that have twisted your gut continuously for days ease slightly. Your fever, which has been climbing steadily, breaks in a flood of sweat that soaks your threadbare shift. The burning pain in your abdomen, while still present, diminishes from unbearable to merely excruciating. Hours pass. You manage to keep down small sips of watered ale, the liquid staying in your system long enough to begin the achingly slow process of rehydration. By evening, you've gone 2 hours without an evacuation, the longest period since your ordeal began. You've won dysentery's cruel lottery. For reasons no medieval person could possibly understand, perhaps a slightly stronger immune system, a marginally less virulent bacterial strain, or simply random chance, you will be among those who survive. Recovery is neither quick nor complete. For weeks, your intestines remain hypersensitive, reacting to even minor dietary indiscretions with painful cramping and loose stools. The damage to your gut lining means you cannot properly absorb nutrients, leaving you perpetually hungry, yet failing to regain weight. Your strength returns with excruciating slowness, each day bringing incremental improvements, measured in the ability to sit up slightly longer or walk a few more steps before exhaustion overwhelms you. The psychological impacts linger as well. You develop an almost obsessive relationship with water sources, avoiding the village well that likely infected you in favor of collecting rainwater when possible. You become hyper-aware of your body's digestive processes, each minor gurgle triggering memories of your ordeal and fears of recurrence. Most significantly, you now understand viscerally what older villagers have always known, that life in your medieval world balances perpetually on a knife's edge, where something as simple as a drink of water can become a death sentence. This knowledge doesn't change your circumstances, doesn't improve sanitation or create clean water sources, but it adds another layer to the constant vigilance required merely to survive. As summer progresses, the dysentery outbreak in your village gradually subsides. The toll is counted not in dramatic mass graves like those of the Black Death, but in individual losses. The infant next door, the elderly man down the street, 3 children from the poorest hovels, a nursing mother whose milk dried up during her infection. The disease claims perhaps 15 souls from your community of 200, a significant but not catastrophic loss by medieval standards. The true cost of the outbreak, however, extends beyond these deaths. Dozens of survivors like yourself remain weakened, contributing less to crucial harvest work. Children who recovered will bear long-term effects in stunted growth and increased vulnerability to other illnesses. The community's already marginal food reserves have been depleted caring for the sick, making the coming winter more precarious for everyone. And the knowledge that few speak aloud but everyone understands, dysentery is not gone, but merely dormant. Next summer, when the wells run low and the heat turns standing water brackish, the bloody flux will return. Different victims may be chosen, but the disease itself is as much a permanent resident of your village as any human inhabitant. You watch your younger sister drink carelessly from the communal water bucket, and you feel a chill despite the summer heat. Her time may come next year, or the one after. In your medieval world, dysentery isn't a matter of if, but when, and whether you'll be strong enough to survive it again when it inevitably returns to claim its due. Tuberculosis, the wasting death that never left. You wake before dawn, as always, but this morning something feels different. The cough that's troubled you for weeks, the one you dismissed as nothing more than the usual winter hack from breathing smoke-filled air your entire life, has changed. When you press your rough woolen sleeve to your mouth to muffle the sound and avoid waking your sleeping family, you feel something wet against your skin. In the dim light filtering through cracks in your hovel's walls, you can just make out a dark stain. Blood. You've seen this before. Your older sister coughed blood for 2 winters before she finally withered away, her once robust frame reduced to a skeletal husk that barely made an impression on the palate when they carried her out. Your mother's brother faded the same way. The miller's wife, the blacksmith's son, the priest's young assistant, all consumed by the same relentless wasting. It has many names in your world: consumption, the wasting sickness, the white plague, phthisis, but all describe the same merciless killer that has haunted humanity longer than any other disease. While the Black Death may strike with dramatic suddenness and dysentery may ravage with violent expulsion, tuberculosis takes a different approach. It is the patient predator, the silent stalker, the disease that doesn't kill you in days or weeks, but consumes you one cell at a time over months and years. And now, as you stare at the blood on your sleeve in the gray half-light of morning, you know it has chosen you. Tuberculosis doesn't arrive in your medieval world through exotic trade routes or unusual vectors. It has always been here, so deeply embedded in human populations that nearly everyone in your village carries the bacteria in their bodies. The difference between those who develop the disease and those who don't isn't about exposure. It's about the conditions that allow the dormant infection to activate and flourish. And your medieval existence provides the perfect conditions for this hunter to thrive. Look around your home as the first light of dawn illuminates its squalid interior. The single room that houses your family of 7 is perhaps 20 feet square, its walls made of wattle and daub that crack and crumble with every winter frost. The roof leaks in multiple places, creating patches of damp straw on the floor and encouraging black mold that spreads across the lower walls in fuzzy, malevolent colonies. The central hearth fills the space with smoke that never fully escapes through the hole in the roof, coating every surface with sticky residue and every lung with irritating particles. Your family sleeps on a raised platform that occupies one corner, all bodies pressed together for warmth during cold months. Your father's persistent cough, your mother's labored breathing, your siblings' wheezes and sniffles. All these sounds form the nightly symphony of shared respiratory distress. When one person coughs or sneezes, the microscopic droplets reach everyone. Your sleeping area isn't just for rest, it's a nightly exchange of whatever pathogens each family member carries. The air you breathe inside your home is not just smoke-filled, but perpetually damp, especially during winter when shutters remain closed against the cold. This dampness, combined with poor ventilation, creates the ideal environment for bacteria to survive outside a host. Tuberculosis bacilli, coughed into the air, can remain viable for weeks in these dark, moist conditions, waiting for the next inhalation to find a new home. Your diet, chronically inadequate in both quantity and variety, has undermined your body's defenses. The coarse rye bread that forms your primary sustenance offers calories but few of the nutrients needed to maintain a robust immune system. Fresh vegetables appear only briefly during summer months, and meat is a luxury reserved for major feasts or when an animal is too old or sick to serve other purposes. This perpetual malnutrition has created the perfect opening for tuberculosis to exploit. Your daily labor, backbreaking work in the fields, hauling water, chopping wood, has further taxed your already compromised system. While physical activity itself doesn't cause tuberculosis, the combination of exhaustion, inadequate recovery, and the physical stress of heavy labor creates another vulnerability that the disease eagerly exploits. Even your clothing works against you. The rough wool that irritates your skin and is rarely washed harbors not just lice and fleas, but potentially infectious material from previous wearers. In your world of scarce resources, garments pass from person to person until they literally fall apart. Your own tunic previously belonged to your older brother, who died last winter after a lingering illness that looked remarkably similar to what you now face. In this environment, tuberculosis isn't an invader, but an inevitable companion, a predator that has evolved alongside humans for millennia, perfectly adapted to exploit every weakness in your medieval existence. It doesn't need to overcome sophisticated immune systems or compete with hygienic practices. It simply waits for the optimal moment to transform from dormant passenger to active killer. That moment, for you, has arrived. The blood in your cough doesn't immediately change your daily routine. You can't afford to rest or reduce your workload. Your family's survival depends on every able body contributing fully to the endless tasks of medieval subsistence. So you ignore the alarming sign as best you can, wiping away evidence of bloody sputum and swallowing the increasingly metallic taste that fills your mouth after each coughing fit. But tuberculosis, once activated, follows its own inexorable timeline. The fatigue comes first. Not the normal tiredness after a day's labor, but a bone-deep exhaustion that makes even rising from your sleeping pallet feel like wading through mud. Tasks that you once completed without thought now require conscious effort and leave you winded. You find yourself leaning on your hoe in the field, gasping for breath after only a short period of work, earning suspicious glances from others who must compensate for your diminished output. Night brings no relief. Despite your exhaustion, sleep becomes increasingly elusive. Fever arrives as darkness falls, Not the raging, delirious heat of acute infections, but a slow, persistent elevation that peaks in evening hours. You lie on your shared sleeping platform, alternately shivering and sweating, your night shift soaked through by morning. Your family members shift away from your overheated body in their sleep, unconsciously creating the first physical distance that will grow as your disease progresses. The cough worsens week by week. What began as an occasional hack transforms into extended paroxysms that double you over and leave you gasping. These episodes can strike at any time, while eating, causing you to choke on meager mouthfuls of food, during prayers, drawing disapproving glances from those trying to concentrate on the priest's words. In the rare quiet moments before sleep, when your family's collective sigh at yet another disruption becomes audible. The blood becomes more frequent, more copious. At first, it appeared as occasional flecks or streaks in your sputum. Now, entire mouthfuls of bloody material come up during particularly violent coughing spells. You've taken to carrying rags to capture these emissions, hiding them in your clothing, and disposing of the evidence when alone. But concealment becomes increasingly difficult as the disease tightens its grip. Your body begins to change visibly. Weight falls away despite your already lean frame, as if some internal flame is consuming you from within. Your cheekbones become more prominent. Your eyes seem to enlarge as the surrounding tissue recedes. Clothing that once fit properly now hangs loosely, requiring additional cinching of belts and ties. These changes happen slowly enough that you can pretend not to notice them, but quickly enough that others do. Pain joins your growing constellation of symptoms. It begins in your chest, a deep, aching sensation that worsens with breathing and coughing. The simple act of drawing breath becomes an exercise in agony management, each inhalation careful and measured to minimize discomfort. Later, pain spreads to your back and shoulders, as though the disease is radiating outward from its primary site in your lungs. Most disturbing is the gradual alteration in your appearance that carries social significance beyond physical decline. Your skin, once weathered and tanned from outdoor labor, takes on an unnatural pallor, except for two bright spots of color high on your cheeks when fever flares. This distinctive consumption complexion, pale with feverish flush, marks you as clearly as any branded symbol. By the time 3 months have passed since that first blood-flecked cough, your condition has become impossible to hide. Family members exchange worried glances when you experience extended coughing fits. Your reduced work capacity has become a topic of discussion among field laborers who must compensate for your diminishing strength. The priest lingers after services, asking pointed questions about your health while maintaining a careful distance. You have become a marked person, not yet dead, but already beginning the long, visible transition from the world of the living to whatever lies beyond. In centuries to come, tuberculosis will acquire a romantic mythology, the disease of poets, artists, and delicate beauties, whose ethereal pallor and spiritual refinement supposedly transcend crude physical existence. Consumption will become almost fashionable in certain circles, associated with creative genius and heightened sensitivity. But there is nothing romantic or beautiful about what is happening inside your body. The Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacteria that have activated in your lungs are multiplying relentlessly, creating expanding colonies that destroy tissue as they grow. Your body responds by walling off these infections with immune cells, creating small, hard nodules called tubercles, literally the little knobs that give the disease its modern name. But this defensive strategy ultimately fails as the bacteria continue to multiply and spread, killing cells from within these walled fortifications. As these infected areas grow, they begin to merge, forming larger lesions that eventually liquefy, creating cavities in your lung tissue. This progressive destruction explains your worsening cough as your body desperately tries to clear these damaged areas, and the increasing blood in your sputum as the disease erodes blood vessels. The cavities also provide perfect incubators for bacteria to multiply further, accelerating the cycle of infection and destruction. Each time you cough, which happens dozens, eventually hundreds of times daily, you expel millions of bacteria into your environment. In your one-room hovel, with its poor ventilation and crowded sleeping arrangements, these bacteria find easy paths to new hosts. Your younger siblings, already undernourished and constantly exposed to your infectious sputum, are particularly vulnerable. Though you don't understand germ theory, you've seen enough consumption in your village to know that it often claims multiple members of the same family. This knowledge adds guilt to your physical suffering, the awareness that your very breath may doom those you love. The pain in your chest intensifies as the disease advances. Each breath becomes a negotiation with agony. The simple mechanics of breathing, once automatic and unconscious, now require deliberate effort and cause remarkable discomfort. You find yourself taking shallow breaths to minimize movement of your increasingly damaged chest wall, which only worsens your chronic oxygen deprivation. Sleep becomes almost impossible. Beyond the fever and night sweats that leave your bedding perpetually damp, the lying position increases pressure on certain areas of your lungs, triggering violent coughing episodes that wake both you and your increasingly resentful family members. You begin to spend nights semi-upright, leaning against the rough wall of your hovel, drifting in and out of fitful dozing rather than achieving restful sleep. Eating becomes a struggle for multiple reasons. The constant coughing frequently triggers gagging or vomiting when you try to swallow food. The metallic taste of blood never fully leaves your mouth, making even the bland staples of your diet seem unappetizing. Most significantly, your body's battle against infection creates a state of hypermetabolism that burns calories at an accelerated rate while simultaneously suppressing your appetite, a cruel combination that accelerates wasting. As the disease progresses, your cough brings up increasing amounts of purulent, blood-streaked material from your dissolving lungs. The smell becomes distinctive, sweet but putrid, instantly recognizable to anyone who has attended a consumption victim in their final stages. This odor clings to your clothing, your bedding, your hair, marking you with the unmistakable scent of advancing disease. 6 months after your first bloody cough, your condition deteriorates dramatically. The disease, having established firm control of your lungs, begins to spread through your bloodstream to other organs. Your kidneys, liver, intestines, and even your brain may develop tuberculous lesions, each creating its own constellation of symptoms. Diarrhea further accelerates your wasting. Headaches and confusion suggest the infection has reached your central nervous system. Blood in your urine indicates kidney involvement. The galloping consumption has begun, the final phase where the disease seems to accelerate its destruction, as though impatient to complete its work. Your weight loss becomes extreme, with ribs and vertebrae clearly visible through skin that has taken on a translucent quality. Your fingers and toes develop a distinctive clubbing, the tips widening and nails curving downward, a physical manifestation of chronic oxygen deprivation. Throughout this physical devastation, your mind remains clear enough to comprehend what's happening, to experience the fear and witness your own dissolution. Unlike acute infections that might grant the mercy of delirium. Tuberculosis often preserves consciousness until near the end, forcing you to observe your own physical decline in excruciating detail. This is the reality behind the romanticized consumption of later literature. Not a beautiful fading, but a systematic destruction of your body from within. A wasting that leaves you fully aware of each incremental loss of function and dignity. Long before tuberculosis claims your final breath, it orchestrates your social death. A gradual exclusion from normal human interactions that makes the physical suffering only one dimension of your experience. The process begins subtly. Family members start sleeping farther away from you on the shared platform, creating small but unmistakable distance. Your mother still cares for you but washes her hands more frequently after touching you or your belongings. Your siblings no longer eat from the same bowl as you. Your personal wooden spoon and cup are now kept separate from the family's communal utensils. In the wider village, your isolation becomes more pronounced. People who once greeted you warmly now nod from a distance. Conversations stop when you approach and resume after you pass. At church, the space around your usual spot gradually empties as others find reasons to stand elsewhere. The priest still offers blessing, but no longer places his hand directly on your head, instead making the sign of the cross from a prudent distance. This isolation isn't born of cruelty, but of hard-won medieval wisdom. Your community has witnessed countless consumption deaths and recognized its contagious nature through bitter experience. They can't explain germ theory, but generations of observation have taught them that sleeping near, eating with, or breathing the same air as a consumption victim dramatically increases one's chances of developing the disease. Your diminishing work capacity accelerates your social exclusion. Medieval survival leaves little room for those who cannot contribute. As your strength fails and your productive output decreases, your value to the community declines proportionately. Assistance is offered not from charity, but from pragmatic calculation. Your family receives help with your care, primarily to prevent your condition from compromising the labor of healthy members. The economics of your illness become increasingly oppressive. Medicine, such as it exists in your world, costs money or trade goods your family can ill afford. The herb woman demands payment for her cough remedies, largely ineffective concoctions of horehound, colt's foot, and honey, but the only treatment available. The cost of extra bedding material to replace what you've soiled with blood and sweat represents a significant expense. Even the additional firewood needed to keep you warm, as your wasting body loses its ability to regulate temperature, strains your family's resources. Your mother begins selling small household items to cover these costs. The copper pot passed down from her grandmother, the better wool cloak saved for special occasions, the single silver spoon that represented a modest family treasure. These sacrifices are made with outward willingness, but inevitable resentment. Each transaction a reminder of how your illness consumes more than just your body. The psychological dimension of this social death may be its cruelest aspect. You watch yourself transform from contributor to burden, from community member to cautionary presence. Children who once played with your younger siblings are now kept away from your home. Potential marriage arrangements for your brother are complicated by your presence in the household. Your father's requests for work assistance are sometimes refused by neighbors who fear entering your dwelling. Most painful is watching the gradual emotional detachment of those closest to you. It begins with subtle shifts in how they interact. Less physical contact, shorter conversations, fewer shared confidences. As your illness stretches from months toward a year, you notice family members preparing for your absence, even while you still live. They discuss future plans that tacitly exclude you. They redistribute your few possessions. They speak of you in ways that suggest you're already more memory than presence. This anticipatory grief, their emotional withdrawal before your physical death, creates a profound isolation, more painful than physical symptoms. You become a ghost, haunting your own life, witnessing your social erasure while still drawing breath. In many ways, this incremental exclusion from the world of human connection constitutes a death more traumatic than the biological ending that awaits. As your condition deteriorates toward its inevitable conclusion, the most terrifying aspect of tuberculosis reveals itself. Its ability to claim not just individuals, but entire families. Its patient willingness to wait years between claiming successive victims. 9 months after your first bloody cough, your youngest sister develops a persistent hack. At first, your parents attribute it to the winter cold, to smoke from the hearth, to the dampness that pervades your dwelling. But you recognize the sound, the same dry, insistent cough that began your own descent. You notice her increasing fatigue, the slight flush that appears on her cheeks in late afternoon. The same bacteria that are destroying your lungs have found a new host, transmitted through countless exposures to your coughing, through shared utensils before your family implemented separation, through the confined air of your one-room dwelling, where every breath mingles with others. The tubercles that began growing in her lungs months ago have finally expanded enough to trigger symptoms. Her illness progresses much faster than yours did, a common pattern in household transmission, where subsequent cases often advance more rapidly than the index infection. The bacteria, having adapted to one family member's immune system, seem to gain virulence when attacking genetically similar hosts. Within weeks, she's coughing blood. By midwinter, she's confined to the sleeping platform you vacated when you became too weak to climb onto it, now spending your days and nights on a straw pallet near the hearth. The village priest visits more frequently now, his expression grim as he observes the second consumption victim in your household. He speaks vaguely of bad air and familial susceptibility, reflecting medieval understanding of disease transmission that recognizes patterns without identifying mechanisms. What he doesn't say, but everyone understands, is that your family is now marked. Consumption has found your bloodline and will likely return again and again until none remain. This pattern has played out countless times in your village. The tanner's family lost 4 members over 6 years. The miller watched his wife, 3 children, and eventually himself succumb in succession. The blacksmith's lineage was nearly erased, with only a single son surviving to continue the craft. Consumption doesn't just kill individuals, it exterminates entire genetic lines with a methodical patience unmatched by other diseases. As winter deepens, your mother develops the telltale cough. Your father watches her with undisguised terror, knowing that her infection threatens not just another devastating loss, but the collapse of your family's entire functional structure. Without her labor, cooking, cleaning, garden tending, cloth making, child minding, survival becomes questionable even if other members remain healthy. You observe these developments from your pallet by the hearth, too weak now to rise unassisted, your own disease having progressed to its terminal stages. The guilt is overwhelming. The knowledge that your continued presence in the household likely seeded these new infections. Yet medieval conditions offer no alternatives. There are no hospitals or sanatoriums, no isolation facilities for infectious cases. Families suffer and die together because no other options exist. The mathematics of tuberculosis in your medieval world are merciless. In a household where one active case exists, up to 50% of close contacts may become infected. Of those infected, perhaps 10% will develop active disease within a year, and another 5% will activate later in life. These percentages, unknown to medieval minds but painfully evident in observed patterns, translate to devastation when played out across generations in conditions of crowding, malnutrition, and non-existent medical care. As winter gives way to early spring, your body has little left to surrender to the disease that has consumed you from within for nearly a year. Your weight has decreased by more than half. The robust farm worker transformed into a skeletal figure, barely raising the straw of your palate. Your cough continues but has weakened along with the rest of you, no longer producing the copious bloody sputum of earlier stages, but a thin, pink-tinged froth that bubbles at your lips with each labored breath. The pain has paradoxically diminished in these final stages, not because healing has occurred, but because your nervous system, like all other bodily systems, has begun to fail. This relative comfort is one of consumption's few mercies, allowing some victims a period of comparative peace before the end. Medieval observers note this phenomenon as a lightening before death, often misinterpreted as improvement rather than final decline. Your family moves around you in the daily routines of survival, their actions increasingly divorced from your existence. Your sister's coughing punctuates these activities, a persistent reminder of the disease's continued presence and your grim legacy. Your mother performs her tasks more slowly now, stopping frequently to rest, her own infection advancing rapidly through her already exhausted body. The priest visits one final time, administering last rites even though you might linger for days or weeks. His schedule is busy, his time limited by the needs of the entire parish. This perfunctory spiritual conclusion to your earthly existence feels appropriately abbreviated, a fitting end to a life cut short, a brief ceremony for a brief span of years. In your final days, consciousness comes and goes. You experience moments of surprising lucidity between periods of gray half-awareness. During these clear intervals, you notice details with extraordinary sharpness. The particular pattern of smoke stains on the rafters above your pallet, the texture of the rough blanket covering your wasted limbs, the specific quality of light that enters through cracks in the daub walls during late afternoon. Your actual death, when it comes, is anticlimactic, not a dramatic final struggle but a gradual diminishment. Your breathing, already shallow and irregular, simply becomes more so until the pauses between inhalations grow longer than the breaths themselves. Your family might not immediately notice the moment of transition. Your physical presence has faded so gradually that its final absence registers as continuation rather than conclusion. Burial comes quickly in your medieval world, where bodies are interred within a day of death, regardless of season. No embalming preserves your remains, no elaborate casket separates you from the earth. Wrapped in the family's oldest length of cloth, one too worn for any other use, your body is placed directly into the ground in the churchyard, joining generations who have completed the same brief cycle of labor, suffering, and extinction. The grave is marked with a simple wooden cross that will rot within a decade, erasing your individual identity from communal memory. Only family stories will preserve specific knowledge of your existence, and these too will fade as consumption continues its work among your relatives. The disease that claimed you will outlive your remembrance, continuing its patient harvest through countless generations until modern medicine finally develops means to combat it. Your sister will follow you before summer arrives, your mother perhaps by harvest time. Your father and remaining siblings face uncertain fates, already infected, but possibly among those whose bodies successfully contain the bacteria or merely waiting for conditions of stress or malnutrition to trigger their own active cases. In your medieval world, tuberculosis isn't an occasional visitor, but a permanent resident, claiming between 20 to 40% of all adult deaths in some periods and regions. Its dominance as a killer would continue unchanged for centuries, through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. Not until the development of antibiotics in the mid-20th century would its ancient reign face significant challenge. For you, these future developments mean nothing. Your brief existence, approximately 2 decades from birth to death, has followed the common medieval pattern: a short life of labor, hardship, and ultimately consumption. Your individual suffering, multiplied across millions of victims over centuries, represents humanity's longest-running epidemic, a continuous biological catastrophe so pervasive it was considered simply part of the human condition rather than an extraordinary event. As spring advances, new grass grows over your grave, feeding on nutrients released by your decomposing body. The wooden cross tilts slightly with each passing week. Inside your former home, your sister coughs blood into a rag, careful to hide it from your already overburdened mother. The ancient cycle continues, as it has for thousands of years, the patient predator claiming one victim while patiently cultivating the next. Leprosy, the living death that made outcasts of the breathing. The bells announce your approach long before you're visible. That's the law. The wooden clapper in your hand must sound with every step, warning the healthy of your contaminated presence. Around your neck hangs the bell, its constant jingle, a sonic brand declaring your status more effectively than the ragged gray cloak and broad-brimmed hat that mark you as something no longer fully human. You've been dead for 3 years now, not physically. Your heart still beats, your lungs still draw breath, but socially, legally, and spiritually. The day the priest performed the separation ritual was the day you ceased to exist in the world of the living. As you knelt before the altar, he intoned the office of the dead over your still animate body, casting handfuls of cemetery earth onto your bowed head. Your family wept as though attending your actual funeral, and in every way that mattered, they were. I forbid you to ever enter a church, monastery, fair, mill, marketplace, or company of persons. I forbid you to wash your hands or your belongings in any stream or fountain. I forbid you to go outside without your leper's clothes and your bell to sound warning. I forbid you to touch children or to give them anything. I forbid you to eat or drink from any vessel but your own. With these prohibitions, you were cast out from human society more completely than any criminal or heretic. At least they could repent or serve their sentence. Your crime was written in your corrupting flesh, your sentence to continue until your body finally surrendered to the disease that had already claimed your humanity. This is leprosy in medieval Europe, not just a disease, but a transformation of status so profound that it constitutes a living death. And your journey into this purgatory began with something as innocuous as a small, discolored patch of skin that didn't itch or hurt. The deceptively gentle beginning of the most feared affliction of your age. It started 3 winters ago with a patch of skin on your forearm that seemed lighter than the surrounding flesh. You barely noticed it at first, just another mark on a body already mapped with the scars and calluses of peasant labor. When it grew larger and developed a distinctive raised border, you covered it with your sleeve and said nothing. Perhaps it would fade. Perhaps it was nothing. But it didn't fade. Instead, more patches appeared on your back, your legs, eventually your face. Still, they caused no pain, no itching, no physical distress of any kind. Their only symptom was their visibility, their pale presence on your increasingly mottled skin. This absence of sensation was, ironically, the disease's most damning feature. When the priest pressed a heated blade against one of the patches and you felt nothing, your fate was sealed. Anesthetic lesions, the more knowledgeable would call them. Spots where the bacteria had attacked your peripheral nerves, destroying your ability to feel pain, pressure, or temperature. But in your medieval world without microscopes or bacterial theory, this lack of feeling wasn't recognized as nerve damage. It was something far more significant, supernatural evidence of a corruption so profound that God himself had withdrawn the gift of sensation from the affected flesh. The patches continued to spread, now joined by small nodules that formed primarily on your face, ears, and extremities. These began as barely perceptible bumps, but gradually enlarged into distinct protrusions that distorted your features. Your eyebrows thickened and bulged outward. The skin on your forehead developed folds and furrows like a plowed field. Your earlobes swelled to pendulous lobes that pulled the entire structure downward. As the disease progressed, your face betrayed you most completely. The nodular growths concentrated there created the condition's most recognizable feature, the leonine countenance that caused people to recoil in horror. Your once familiar features disappeared beneath lumpy protrusions and thickened skin that pulled your eyelids downward and caused your lower lip to protrude. When you caught your reflection in still water, a lion-like mask stared back, a grotesque parody of the human face you once possessed. With each physical change, you watched your community's reaction transform from concern to fear to revulsion. Mothers pulled children away when you approached. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when you entered a space. Friends began declining your company, offering transparent excuses. Even your family grew increasingly uncomfortable, though they tried to hide it, serving your food in separate vessels, washing your clothing separately, creating subtle distance that widened by increments. The final physical confirmation came when your fingers and toes began to claw inward, their tendons damaged by the same nerve destruction that eliminated sensation. This distinctive curling, combined with the facial disfigurement and patchy skin, removed any last doubt. The priest was summoned. Examinations were performed. The verdict was delivered with a finality that brooked no appeal. Leprosy, unclean, dead to the world. The separation ritual marked your transition from human to monster, from community member to perpetual outsider. In the church where you were baptized, married, and participated in countless communal celebrations, you knelt one final time, not as worshiper, but as symbolic corpse. The priest, standing at a careful distance, performed the mass for the dead over your bowed form, the same prayers and rituals used for actual cadavers. As the service concluded, he cast cemetery soil on your head. Be dead to the world, but alive again unto God. You were then led from the church to the cemetery, where you symbolically laid yourself in an open grave, experiencing a burial without the mercy of preceding death. What followed was the presentation of the items that would define your new existence. The clapper and bell to announce your contaminating presence, the distinctive gray cloak and broad-brimmed hat that served as visible warning, the bowl and cup that only you could touch, the gloves to cover your increasingly deformed hands. These weren't merely practical tools, but the physical embodiments of your new identity, the trappings of a walking corpse. The final element of your transformation came with the reading of prohibitions, the comprehensive list of ordinary activities now forbidden to you. Beyond the obvious bans on physical contact and shared spaces, these restrictions systematically dismantled your humanity piece by piece. You could not speak to anyone unless standing downwind. You could not walk on narrow paths where others might pass. You could not touch anything in markets that you did not purchase. You could not drink from or bathe in any communal water source. You could not enter churches during services, but must stand outside viewing the mass through specially constructed leper squints, narrow openings in the church wall. With these ceremonies complete, you cease to exist as the person you once were. Your name would no longer be spoken except as a tragic reference. Your possessions were distributed as though after death. Your legal rights were essentially terminated. You could not inherit property, bear witness in court, or enter into contracts. Your marriage was considered dissolved, your spouse free to remarry as though widowed. This civil death was, in many ways, more complete than physical expiration. The deceased at least retained their identity in memory and memorial, their names spoken with respect, their graves visited and tended. You, however, became something worse than dead, a cautionary specter, a nameless warning, the embodiment of divine punishment, shambling at the edges of ordinary existence. After separation came relocation to your new dwelling, not the leper colony of popular imagination, which existed primarily near larger cities, but a simple one-room hut, positioned at a carefully calculated distance from the village. Far enough to prevent contamination, yet close enough for the occasional delivery of alms or supplies, this structure stood beside a little-used road where you would encounter minimal traffic. The hut itself barely deserved the name shelter. Cruder than even the peasant hovels of the village, it consisted of rough planks with gaps that let in wind, rain, and snow. A small hearth provided inadequate warmth, its smoke escaping through a hole in the roof that also admitted precipitation. No windows, no furniture beyond a straw pallet and a single stool, no comfort of any kind. Even prisoners in the Lord's dungeon received better accommodation than this bare box, intended for what remained of your life. Your daily existence became defined by solitude and begging. Each morning, you would walk to the village edge, stand near the path leading to the church or market, sound your warning bells, and hold out your bowl for any alms the charitable might toss from a safe distance. Some days brought moldy bread crusts or vegetable scraps. Many days yielded nothing. The church officially encouraged charity toward lepers, but fear typically overwhelmed Christian duty when faced with your disfigured presence. On particularly desperate days, you might approach the back doors of homes that once welcomed you as neighbor or friend, calling out for any scraps they could spare. These moments constituted your most acute humiliation, begging from people who had shared your table, who had celebrated harvests and holy days alongside you, who now tossed food scraps toward you with expressions of disgust or pity before hurriedly closing their doors. The physical progression of your disease continued in exile, its effects amplified by inadequate nutrition, exposure to elements, and the inability to properly clean yourself or your surroundings. Without sensation in your extremities, you suffered injuries without awareness, stepping on thorns, touching hot objects, wearing wounds into your feet with improper walking. These unnoticed injuries became infected, the infections untreated, leading to progressive tissue damage. Your hands and feet began to shorten as the small bones of fingers and toes were reabsorbed by your body, not falling off as popular myth suggested, but gradually disappearing as destructive inflammation removed protective sensation and structural integrity. Each lost joint, each collapsed digit, represented another piece of your humanity eroded by the relentless bacterial siege. Perhaps most devastating was the progressive loss of your face, not merely through disfigurement, but through functional deterioration. As the bacilli attacked facial nerves, you lost the ability to close your eyes completely, resulting in chronic dryness, ulceration, and eventually blindness in one or both eyes. The collapse of nasal cartilage created a distinctive flattened appearance while eliminating your sense of smell. Damage to facial nerves left parts of your expression frozen, creating a mask-like appearance that further dehumanized you in others' perception. Your voice changed as nodules formed in your throat and mouth, becoming hoarse and unfamiliar even to your own ears. This vocal alteration represented yet another loss of identity. The distinctive sound that friends and family had recognized instantly, now transformed into the rasping croak associated exclusively with your disease state. All these changes occurred gradually over years, rather than weeks or months. Leprosy, unlike the dramatic, swift progression of plague or smallpox, operated with terrible patience, dismantling your body and identity piece by infinitesimal piece. This glacial pace created its own unique torture, the constant awareness of decline without the mercy of rapid conclusion. The physical devastation of leprosy, however horrific, paled in comparison to its psychological impacts. Unlike victims of plague or dysentery who retained their human status despite illness, you experienced complete social death while remaining biologically alive and mentally aware, forced to witness your own obliteration from the community of humans. The absolute isolation destroyed foundations of identity that most people never consciously recognize. Humans define themselves largely through interaction, the reflection of self in others' responses, the network of relationships that create meaning and position. When all meaningful interaction ceased, when your very presence became cause for alarm rather than welcome, the self began to dissolve along with the body. The loss of touch proved particularly devastating. No human hand would intentionally contact your flesh again. No comforting embrace, no clasp of greeting, no casual brush of fingers when passing an object. This complete tactile isolation created a psychological state unknown to even the most severely imprisoned criminal, who might at least receive rough handling from guards. You became untouchable in the most literal and complete sense, your skin a boundary no other human would willingly cross. Religious explanation compounded psychological suffering. In medieval understanding, leprosy represented divine punishment, not random bacterial infection, but specific retribution for sin. This belief was so entrenched that medical treatises listed specific spiritual transgressions alongside physical symptoms. Lust, pride, and greed were considered particularly likely to manifest as leprosy, creating a presumption of moral failing that accompanied physical deterioration. This spiritual interpretation meant that you not only suffered physically and socially, but were widely presumed guilty of secret sins so terrible they warranted divine punishment visible in your flesh. Well-meaning priests might explain your affliction as purgatorial, suffering on earth to reduce time in the afterlife's cleansing fires, but this cold comfort did little to offset the constant implication of deserved punishment.